What event or incident happened at your job that caused a mass firing or mass quitting? Oh boy, I think I might have a story that wins this thread, but I'm way too late to this party. When I was in high school, I took a part-time job doing tech support for a dial-up ISP. The company was pretty small and only had a handful of employees. The owner's wife did HR and accounting, her brother was in charge of the technical operations, and was my boss, plus a web developer and the regular tech support guy, who were best friends. There were also a handful of developers at a sister company which develops custom software. My work schedule was evenings a few days per week plus normal hours on the weekend. My boss was usually there before me on Saturdays, but one week I was surprised to find the office locked. As the day progressed, I became increasingly confused by the fact that nobody else had shown up. There were almost always a few people at least passing through, but I'd been there all morning without seeing anyone at all. Finally, after a few hours, my boss walked in and said, "You're probably wondering where everyone is." He told me that everyone, except me, the owner and his wife had quit. He wouldn't say why, but assured me that it wasn't something I needed to worry about, and that, since his job was vital, he was going to stay at the company until a replacement could be found. I tried to find out what was happening, but he said I'd have to talk to the owner. When the owner arrived, there were clearly tension between the two of them. He also wouldn't tell me what had happened, but was very eager to make sure I wasn't going to jump ship. Eventually, they hired new employees and found a replacement for my boss, and things went back to normal. But I still didn't have any idea what the hell had happened, and the owner clearly wasn't interested in discussing it. Cut to a few months later. I'm walking around the show floor at the Macworld conference in New York when I bumped into the former tech support guy and former web developer. We spent a few minutes catching up. Then the tech support guy grins and says, "Tech, so do you know what happened? Why did everyone quit?" Me: "No, but I've certainly been curious." Owner didn't tell me and I didn't want to pry. Tech: "He and his wife got excommunicated." Me: blank stare. Tech: "Didn't you know we're all Jehovah's Witnesses?" Apparently everyone knew each other from the church, and Jehovah's Witnesses aren't allowed to have anything to do with people who have been excommunicated. It wasn't until years later that I learned that the owner and his wife were and someone in the church found out. The first thing I thought of when I read excommunicated was John Wick. Sorry, not sorry. That was an awesome movie. Story 2. Michael Jackson died at her hospital. There were many HIPAA violations, as doctors, nurses, and staff all kept leaking information to their friends and family, and to the media, specifically TMZ. Another similar issue came up in my hospital. Should all important people be given an increased confidentiality status? For example, a patient comes in. Concerned family members call the hospital seeking information. The only way healthcare providers, e.g. doctors, nurses, can divulge information if 1. They have a PIN number, think of a secret password, or 2. The patient allows it. So if someone calls our hospital and asks, "How is so-and-so doing?" Whether or not we give information about the patient, we're basically saying, "Yes, the patient is hospitalized," which to many is already giving too much away. So should pseudonyms be used for important people? Well, what determines an important person? Healthcare practitioners are supposed to treat all people without partiality. Don't get me wrong, I agree with you, but the who determines who is important and who is not was an issue of contention in my own facility. Story 3. I used to work at a pickle factory in Michigan. When the new owners took over, they insisted they change the recipe that had been the same for over 50 years without consulting the workers. Some of the employees' parents and grandparents had worked there and apparently felt so strongly about the recipe that 13 people quit and the majority else were outside with signs the next few days until eventually they switched it, almost, all their way back. None of those who quit came back. I didn't quit and actually enjoyed both recipes, but now I can't tolerate the smell or taste of pickles. I used to love them. Story 4. I work in the local government for an urban country. One of the IT departments reclassified all their employees as exempt, a designation designed for political appointments, fired them all, only exempt employees can be fired without cause, and asked them to submit resumes if they wanted their jobs back. Their goal was to get rid of some employees they felt were dead weight, but it turns out the most valued employees, the ones with readily marketable skills in the prime of their careers, just shook their heads and had jobs elsewhere by the end of the week. Furthermore, when you pull a stunt like that, word gets out and resumes don't come flooding in. They're still trying to recover. IT management that makes such a profoundly stupid and lazy decision deserves the consequence of it. Performance review should have been done here, but it's a lot of work and takes time. A good manager would have played the long game and been able to change the culture, retain good employees, and eliminate the poor performers within their first year. Randomly throw out your most loyal employees out of office and then demand they can't come back until they resubmit their resumes. Flawless plan. Flawless plan indeed. Story 5. Worked in a bar and a nightclub. Restaurant by day, club by night. 5 bartenders behind the bar on any given Friday and Saturday, plus barbacks. Thought something was weird about our credit card tips. Went to the bar manager. We collect receipts and checkouts plus paychecks for a few weeks. Examine them. Someone is withholding quite a bit of our tips. Fast forward to a Friday night, busy as hell. Owner comes in to see how things are going and the bar manager confronts him. Owner denies any wrongdoing and claims what he's doing is legal. It wasn't. He was pocketing the withheld tips. Bar manager signals for me to come over, threatens to quit if the owner doesn't return the money he stole. Owner more or less says tough nuts. Bar manager walks out. I lean into the bar long enough to tell one of the bartenders what happened, give the owner a snarky wave, and follow him out. 5 minutes later, the rest of the bar staff joins us, and we wander down the road to another bar to commiserate over the BS that went down. Left over 500 people in the club with no bar staff. Zero crap given. Found out a few days later that the daytime serving staff heard what happened and quit too. Last I heard, they had to shut down for a few weeks to restaff. Still overly proud of myself for that. Screw that guy. Story 6. I was working retail and many of the workers engaged in mass exodus because the only manager anybody really liked quit. The way it happened was this. One employee was a recent hire. He basically got the position because 2 of his friends already worked there and vouched for him. He regularly slacked off, got caught taking extra breaks, was never around when anybody needed him, and was generally a waste of space. One day, the manager everyone loves is on duty. He sends this kid out to collect carts from the lot. Now, a big group of this kid's friends had just arrived in the store. The kid goes and finds another employee and says, "Hey, the manager told me to tell you to go get carts out of the lot," and proceeds to follow his friends around the store doing nothing. Manager sees the other employee collecting carts and asks him why he's doing it, as it's not his usual duty. "Oh, so-and-so told me that you wanted me to get carts?" Manager, knowing this kid has a record as a piss-poor employee, is furious, hunts him down in the store and takes him to the office for a reprimand. After the reprimand, the kid leaves out the front of the store. He brings back 2 carts over the next 20 minutes. Finally, the manager notices that we're completely out of carts. It's now been half an hour since he reprimands this kid and sent him to the lot, so he goes outside to see what's up. Kid is leaning against the front wall of the building on his phone with his girlfriend. Manager fires him on the spot. The kid goes to HR to get his last check the next day, sits down with the HR manager and says that the manager everyone likes is selling illegal substances to employees, many of whom were minors, on work time. Then goes outside and calls the manager's work phone and leaves a message that he's going to mess him up for firing him. The whole store goes nuts. There are accusations flying from management to everybody. Every single employee is pulled to HR and interrogated. Did this manager ever sell you illegal substances? Have you ever seen him sell someone said illegal substances? Have you ever seen him use them? Have you ever heard him talk about using them? No, 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 no. And everybody they talk to points the finger at this disgruntled ex-employee. Everyone knows he started this rumor just to try to get back at this manager. The manager plays the recorded message for management that this kid left in his work cell, but they dismissed it because there's no way to know it's him. Grilling continues for 3 or 4 days. Some people are pulled in for multiple interviews. Gossip starts that they're going to fire this manager. They don't have any solid evidence against him, but this ex-employee and his 2 friends who still work at the store have provided stories that match one another. Well, no sh**. They hang out every day and these interviews lasted almost a week, enough that they think the manager needs to be fired. Manager doesn't wait for them to do it. He walks in one day and says, "Screw this, I quit. I drafted my letter of resignation when this crap started anyway. Here's my keys." About half of the employees on shift walked out right there when he did. Almost everyone else quit within the next week. The last I heard, the only people who didn't quit were the 2 friends of the kid who never did his job. Story 7. My mom used to work for a college. She started there as a secretary when the college was just starting out and gradually moved up until she was running the whole business department. Without her knowing, the college ran interviews and hired a woman to be her superior. They never asked my mom to apply for the position and never mentioned it to her until the day this woman was introduced to her. And my mom's boss informed my mom she was supposed to train this woman to be her boss for the department. My mom was clearly hurt and upset, but she needed her job and just couldn't quit. So she sucked it up and trained this woman while putting on her best face and being cordial. All the rest of the people who worked under my mom in the department could not stand this woman and were incredibly upset with the situation as well. One morning, my mom walks through the doors and the boss of the college is waiting for her. He brings her into his office and fires her. Within the month, the rest of the department all quit as well, leaving them to hire and train all new people right before fall semester started. 6 months later, the woman they hired to replace my mom quit. They had the balls to call my mom and ask her back. You can guess where she told them to shove it. I'd tell them I'd come back. I'd double pay and twice as much vacation time. Story 8. I worked at Wendy's. One of the shift managers quit for personal reasons, so the regional manager had all the other shift managers cover the now open shifts. The shift managers were now working overtime and didn't want to. They gave the regional manager a deadline of a month to get a new shift manager. A month goes by and the shift managers confront the regional manager because there's been no replacement. Turns out he hasn't even posted a job listing yet. They were so livid that all of them quit in the same day. Now the regional manager had to take all the shifts until he could hire new people, and he did a terrible job too. Normally 4 to 6 people were working at a time at our location because it wasn't dead slow but wasn't a hot spot. 6 usually only hitting for a few hour overlap during expected rushes. With him as manager, he expected 7 people to be working always. This means he increased all of our hours as well and had no respect for the hours people usually worked. This caused another mass exodus of normal workers, including me, because I didn't want to work full-time while going to school. I bet they would have tried to keep this guy at a listed 7.5 hours a day max to keep him off full-time. Speaking of full-time, I work more than 8 hours a day just to make content for you, and you hitting the like button and subscribing makes the 8 hours worth it. So come on, do it. I know you want to. Story 9. Train company in Sweden. One day many years ago, someone found a document stating some changes to overtime policy. It was just lying on a table in the middle of the break room. One copy only. Due to the nature of the business, there tends to be a lot of shifting hours back and forth. Sometimes we, drivers, can get home hours and hours early, and other times we get horrendously late. Hence, overtime. This document stated that now overtime forms had to be filled for when we came home early, undertime, so to speak. This otherwise already scheduled time would be withdrawn and the company would then be able to reuse that time. Negative overtime. One copy on a table, and a few hours later, people had come in from all over in a major huff. There were outright and immediate resignations, shouting matches, phone calls to union representatives, a huge outcry overall. Date in the document and the day was found, April 1. Much fun was had. Please tell me someone got in deep crap for such a bad joke. Story 10. In a team of 30 IT consultants that had been working on a big project for a couple of years, the standing offer, the governed rates, etc., had been defined and would continue for the next few years. But the renewal deadline for each of our individual contracts with the contracting companies, middleman, was just a week away and we hadn't seen the paperwork, just promises that we were being renewed. Finally get the paperwork and see a 10% cut in rates. Quite surprised because the standing offer didn't have any such change. Contracting company says the client department renegotiated new rates by saying that another company could be used instead. We were shocked that the client would put such a big project at risk. People made inquiries. It turns out the client department made no such changes. The contracting company was just making a grab for a bigger piece of the pie. There was outrage. People quit. Others yelled and got fired, etc. The company had to quickly backpedal and claim it was an administrative error. Yeah, right. But the damage was done. It didn't end there, though. About 6 months later, a small group of consultants on another project merged with us. They'd been working under the same contract vehicle. As we're getting to know these 5 guys, one of them says, "That 30% cut 6 months ago was nasty, eh?" Turns out the company got from these guys what they couldn't get from us, and these poor suckers hadn't known it was a fiction. Crap hits the fan once again. The 5 quit en masse. Problem was, their jobs were critical. They got hired back with hefty raises, almost double their original if memory serves. Stupid, greedy company. Story 11. I worked in the corporate headquarters for a large national retailer. After 20 years in business, the company was sold to an arrogant billionaire who put his son in charge. His first job after completing his MBA. The son decided to relocate headquarters 500 miles away, close to his daddy's headquarters. He gave us 30 days notice to move with no moving compensation or lose our jobs. Out of 300 employees, 1 moved. I'd already been looking for a job, the writing was on the wall. I accepted a new position the day after the announcement and gave 2 weeks' notice. My boss went ballistic. Said, "What are we supposed to do? No one can fill your job here and we won't have anyone new until we move. You're not a team player." Bonus, the company was out of business within 60 days after the move, 4 months after the acquisition. They had spent $50 million to buy it. Story 12. In the early 90s, I worked for a large construction company in Florida. I was on the road crew. One of the machines we used was called a mixer. The objective of this machine was to mix up the subgrade of a road. It has giant teeth that spin insanely fast. Well, my crew had laid down the dirt, lime rock, and clay and now had to run the mixer over it. Well, someone set the blades too low and ripped an international fiber optic cable out of the ground. A clean cut would have been bad, but this cable was shredded beyond belief. It cost $100,000 per hour that this cable was down. Luckily, I wasn't at work that day. When I came in the next day, anyone who was even near the incident got fired. My whole crew was extinct. To put into perspective, the cable was fatter than your upper leg and composed of thousands of glass strands. Every strand had to be fused back together. It cost the company millions. Total, about 40 people were fired and I was put on another crew. A lot of you are confusing a mill machine with a mixer. A mill machine only removes a layer of asphalt from the road for repaving. A road construction mixer is like a giant garden tiller that mixes up the different materials for the subgrade before the asphalt. It goes way deeper and combines different layers of clay, lime rock, and dirt. Story 13. Remember Walden Books, the bookstore in the mall? I had a friend who worked there as a store manager. They hired him to clean up the store. It was a total wreck. Dozens of unopened shipment boxes crammed in the back room, behind the cash wrap, even under shelves. He found new releases from 3 months back that were never available to buy. It was really, really bad. On top of that, the district manager who hired him told him he had 3 weeks to get the store in order without extra hours and without sales dropping. If you've worked retail before, you know this is impossible. My friend argues with the district manager and the DM basically tells him he doesn't care if they work off the clock to get it done. It will be done or he'll turn the entire staff, fire them. So for 3 weeks, my friend and his staff worked 24/7, only clocking in for allotted shifts. My friend would even sleep in the back room in a sleeping bag. And miracles upon miracles, he got it cleaned up before the deadline. The deadline comes and the DM comes back with 2 LP operatives. They start pulling the staff one by one to the back and grill them until they get them to admit working off the clock. When they get to my friend, he tells them outright that the DM told him to do it, and the DM sat there and denied the whole thing. So he says to the LP guys, "How else would we get this done without the deadline time allotted? You knew what this store looked like before, and you know how much time we had." The LP guys just looked at each other, then fired the entire staff. That same day, a manager and 3 associates were hired. The DM already had them in the wings and was just waiting for my friend to get the store in working order to pass it off to his friend. This is probably one of the worst in the thread. Lots of idiots, lots of selfish people, lots of corporate higher-ups who only see the cash flow. That obviously worked out well. Isn't that chain out of business? Story 14. Not an en masse walkout, but sort of a snowball effect. I worked for a help desk that had pretty awful management. It didn't seem too bad when I was a grunt. After I got promoted to a tier 2 is when it became abundantly clear that management had no idea what they were doing. It started pretty simply. When I asked if I would get any training on how to do my new position, I was told that it was on-the-job training, which is fine if that's what they actually gave me. What they meant was, figure it out on your own. That was annoying, but if that was the only issue, I wouldn't be posting this. The wheels slowly started coming off. A couple people left, another got promoted out of the department. They never hired people to fill those places. Instead, they blamed my team for the lower productivity. After about 6 months of declining productivity and management convinced the issue was with the team, which was now down to half its original size, they instituted a policy where we had to report everything we did to management, in real time. This was the beginning of the end for me. The proverbial straw for me came when they instituted a no-talking policy in which we had to ask permission from a supervisor to speak. I left the company shortly after that, and so did about 80% of my team. Last I heard, they'd only replaced one of the 5 people that left around the same time as me. This sounds all too familiar. Must be an IT company thing. Crazy. Hope you weren't too fired up. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you made it this far and didn't quit, I'm sure you'll also enjoy. What is your epic I quit moment? This dude in Story 4 really put his boss in his place. See you in that video.